everyone. You should be hearing my voice because we are opening up the webinar to get ready to start. We will not start until 10 o'clock or perhaps even shortly afterwards because, as I'm sure we're all aware, everything in the world is being sort of stress tested right now, and this webinar software has been a touch glitchy. So apologies if you had to take a little while to log in. And yeah, like I said, we will get started. I want you all to know that Eileen and I are across the table from each other, not going anywhere near each other.
6 feet away.
So,
excellent.
You're definitely a good 6 feet.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay, we're good. So thank you all for joining us on this very odd Wednesday, but I think this is kind of the perfect thing we can all do together. I don't know how many of you are home and listening to this or are still at museums or what, but just some really quick housekeeping. The Vermont Historical Society is now closed to the public. And we are sort of thinking and working on what other things we can do behind the scenes to continue to provide you with information about Vermont history, learning opportunities, that sort of thing. Maybe just, some hangouts so we can all talk history in the time of pandemic together, who knows? But we will be discussing those things internally over the next week or so. If you have any ideas, this is kind of the perfect forum to share them. So type away if you think, hey, it would be cool if you guys did X, Y, or Z. Can't promise anything or everything, but we're taking all ideas right now. So if you want to pitch any to us, please do that. I think we should probably do a quick sound check for Eileen to make sure you can hear her clear too.
Yes, so this is Eileen. Please make sure that I can be heard. Otherwise, I will try to undistance myself slightly to get closer to the microphone. Ooh, echo is fun. Wait, let me make sure that my microphone is
yeah,
off.
you probably got to turn yours off.
No, it says mine's off. It says mine's off, but hopefully that's not going crazy. All right. We're going to try it.
Just so you know as well, because the webinar software is a little glitchy, we're presenting this slightly differently than we have in the past. So you can see my screen share in a slightly different way than you usually can. So Eileen is going to have to be the one checking the chat box and responding to your questions because I cannot see it. So please do type away your feedback, and she can let us know what we need to be doing differently.
Oh, we stopped talking for a second, so
yeah,
sorry. Let us know. We're just waiting for anyone else that might be popping in, hopefully in the next couple seconds. So hopefully you can hear us right now. Okay, there we go. All right, good. So yeah, we're just going to wait another minute or so just to make sure hopefully folks who are trying to get on are able to get on. Again, we hope everybody's internet is working, but it's possible we had a little bit of glitchiness with the webinar software, so hopefully it'll make it through everybody in the world using online software right now, and we'll be able to get to this. But no matter what, this will be available as a recording afterwards. So if for some reason your internet goes out or anything like that, you should be able to get to it afterwards as well. All right, lots of great folks checking in.
All right, that's good.
All right, keep going.
All right, okay. Here we go. How to write an exhibit label. So the two people you hear talking today from the Vermont Historical Society, this is Amanda. I'm the public program manager where I do public programs, what it says in the title, as well as exhibits.
So yes, this is Eileen, and my title is Community Outreach Manager. And so part of what I do is working with local societies around the state on sort of helping with any issues or problems they have, as well as providing programs and services.
All right, here's what we're going to do today. Introductions, which we just did. Check. Go us. Yay. We're going to give, Eileen is going to give you a short overview of local history programs at the Vermont Historical Society, and then a short overview of the larger 2020 project that these series of webinars are about, or a part of, more accurately. And then I'm going to take over a couple of content pieces about the actual meat of our webinar today about writing an exhibit label. We'll do some wrap up, time for questions. We are happy to take questions at any point during the webinar. Please type them into that chat box that you have in the bottom right hand of that screen. And I mentioned this earlier, but because of the way we're doing this webinar today, because the software was glitchy, Eileen is the only one who can see those, so she may interrupt me from time to time. We are watching them. I just, as the main presenter, can't see them immediately, so please be patient a little bit if you don't get your question answered immediately. So we will continue.
Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about sort of the resources and programs we have for local historical societies and museums around the state. So the first up is our bi-weekly local history e-news. So if you have not signed up for that, it's a great chance both to sort of get some information about what we're doing, as well as resources and opportunities available for museums and historical organizations that we think are really great. And then it's also a great chance to list your own events. So we do put everybody's local history projects and programs and exhibit openings and talks in that e-news. So obviously right now that's not happening, but when it does again, it's a great chance to get the word out about what you're doing. And you can sign up for that on our website, vermonthistory.org, and you'll see there's a link at the bottom that says newsletter. Technical assistance and advice. So that's part of what I do is if you have a question, you need some information, email me. You can try giving a call right now. I would say email is the better way to get in touch with a lot of folks. And I'm happy to either sort of give you some information that we have or point you hopefully in a good direction to get more information. You know, I'm also happy hopefully when things get better with the weather and everything else to come out and visit your organization and talk through what you need for help. And then workshops and training. So we do have a workshop scheduled for May 7th. It's the Active Collections Workshop, and it's a workshop we did last year, and we had a big wait list for that, so we're doing it again. So definitely, if you're interested in that, I encourage registration early. Again, obviously, we're at the point where it is currently scheduled for early May, and we will be assessing in a couple weeks if we have to bump it out a little bit later in the year, but as far as we know, it'll still happen. So if you're interested in it, I still think it's a great idea to register for it, and then hopefully we'll we'll either have it on May 7th or at a later date. And so that information on anything we're doing for workshops and training is available on our website as well. And then things for you guys, as well as how we share history. We do have an online directory of local historical societies and museums. I actually just sent a mailing out to everybody who's in the directory, asking them about updates to their entry. So if you are on the directory currently, you should be getting that in the mail. So please keep on the lookout for it. If you are a local historical society or museum, history related that's not in the directory and you'd like to be, please definitely contact me. And a couple other things, we do have a traveling exhibit program. Again, that's another flyer I just sent out in the mail. But it's a great opportunity if you're looking for different exhibits to do, but don't have the time or ability to make your own. These are panel exhibits that you can borrow from us on a variety of topics, and sort of just put them up and you're good to go. And then pub trivia packets, these are super popular. And so these are Vermont history trivia that you can get, and you can hold, again, your own pub trivia event or events at your annual meeting or in your organization. A lot of people do them as fundraisers. Some folks do them just for fun. But that's definitely something to take a look at as well if you're interested in different ways to program. So vermonthistory.org/local history is the spot to find everything. Or again, give me an email. Give me a shout, and I'm happy to talk. Okay, so the next thing we do want to talk about is Technology 2020, or the Vision 2020 program and project. It's a project of the Vermont Curators Group. Probably a lot of you guys, either if you're participating or you've seen it out and about now, but basically this is a year-long project where organizations, museums, historical societies, arts organizations around the state are all doing exhibits and programs related to the theme of technology. And so definitely check out the Facebook group, and there's a website as well to see what's happening right now and what's happening in the future. And so part of what we're doing for that is a exhibit in our local history gallery on the technology and innovation in Vermont history. And this exhibit is going to be a crowdsourced exhibit where hopefully we're getting objects and items from organizations around the state who may not have had the opportunity to participate in a full exhibit in this project. Technically, the application deadline has passed, but we do still have a little bit of room for folks if you're still interested in getting a really great technology, bit of technology from your community in this exhibit. We'd still love to chat with you about that. So it might be something, a great adventure that you have in town, or sort of a wacky, wild, unique thing that somebody made, or it could be something industrial, like if you have a mill or some sort of other industry in town that was important that maybe you want to share with us as well. So that exhibit itself will open in August in our local history gallery in the museum. So even if you're not participating, we hope you will come check it out. Oh, and just to let you know that, again, this webinar is part of our work with the Vision 2020 project, and we did do 2 previous webinars. So if you happen to miss those, the recordings are now online. So that we had choosing objects for exhibits and conducting condition assessments. So if you go to the URL right there, you can get to those recordings and watch those anytime. So it's another, don't have to do it today. All right.
Let's talk content. So the title of the webinar itself, and the reason you're here today, is how to write an exhibit label. We're not planning on teaching you how to write in this webinar, but what we are going to think and talk a lot about is the specific style of writing and the specific way of organizing your information and your writing that you need to practice when you're preparing for an exhibit at a museum or historical society. So what do we mean when we say exhibit labels? That is a catch-all term. We mean a lot of things. For the purposes of this webinar, an exhibit label is any text that is contained within a museum exhibit That can mean the sort of big picture intro, your sentence or two that gives a title to the exhibition or the section. It can mean your really big overview panels, your thesis statement for the exhibition itself that you may have as you're entering the space. It can mean panel text. It can mean all the way down to the labels for individual objects or the information that is on an interactive or other thing that you have placed in the exhibit itself. I've organized this slide in this way because one of the things we're going to be drilling over and over again in this webinar is that the organization of your information when you're presenting that information in exhibit format is crucial. So for this slide, I've classed sort of top, medium, and bottom levels of information hierarchy and the ways that you can think about the information. So we're going to go into this a little bit more and just briefly, but I've classified intro and overview panels as sort of a top level hierarchy. So you can see a picture there of a science exhibit. So up top, that otters and oil don't mix. I would call that a top level hierarchy information. That is the essentials. Your next level is going to be your panel text. So if you have like a section information, there's a next level of information in there. And then your bottom level is going to be like the tiny little bits of information that you can see on some of those walls there. And we're going to be talking and thinking a lot here today about what to put in each section of those and how to write and think about each section of those. So with that in mind, organizing and designing information. The first step even before you get to the writing is to organize the information that you're putting together for your exhibit. How should you do that? You do you. Do you like to do those sort of word cloud style of organized where you put the topic in the center and then you draw lines off and you do bubbles and each bubble is a subset and each bubble has bubbles? Is that how your brain thinks? Great. Do you prefer to think in like a A, B, C, Roman numeral kind of outline, written outline? Great. Organize it like that. Do you throw a whole lot of pieces of paper on the ground and walk around amongst them and rearrange them? Also great. Doesn't matter. Literally doesn't matter. Whatever works for your process. The number one most important thing is that you organize it thoughtfully. That you spend a lot of quality time with your topic and with your information. And I think the thing I want to impart to you here is that exhibits are physical experiences, not just intellectual ones. So you're not going to organize the information in an exhibit the way you would organize it in a book. They just don't work the same way. It's one thing to, in a book, flip back a chapter and go, oh yeah, I remember that thing that I'm referring to here. It's another thing to require a visitor to go across the room to check on something and then come back to your panel. Unless you're designing a specific interactive experience in which that is the goal of what you want someone to do, and I would argue you should do that sparingly, because you're just not going to get as many people to do it as you want to, then your information should also consider the physical space in which you are sharing it, which means that you really want to make sure that everything you want to say about something is close to each other, and there's a flow to it. Most people start in exhibits looking to the left and then going in a circle. So if you want to change the way in which the order in which you're presenting the information, think about how they're physically approaching your exhibit and so on and so forth. I can't necessarily give you specific advice for your specific exhibit because there are almost an infinite number of ways in which you can do this, but think really hard about the grouping of information, the placement of the information, and the way that you are doing it. I've just got a very quick graphic here, and that is a very neatly organized, that's a specific panel, but you can immediately see how your eye moves, catches from one place to another, and that you get information. Thank you, Eileen. I will slow down. We've all been running on a lot of adrenaline over the last week, as I'm sure you have as well. So the graphic on the left, I just thought was a nicely, neatly organized panel. People are going to catch a couple of topic headings. They're going to see their eyes move to see where they need information, and the same should be true for your exhibit. And I would argue that is true whether you are talking about 5,000 square feet, which is what we have over at the Vermont History Museum, that is our core exhibit space, or whether you're talking about 50 square feet, one panel and a couple of objects. It's important to just think about where the information goes. There's not necessarily a wrong answer, but as long as you're thoughtful about it. Think too about different ways to present that information. So exhibit writing is, I would argue, sometimes more challenging than just writing an essay, because here you've got 5 paragraphs. You've got an intro panel and a summary, intro paragraph and a summary paragraph, and then 3 paragraphs to explain in between. With an exhibit, you have a sort of constantly series of interlocking, interdependent challenges and decisions. Your text is one thing, but how does your text work with the objects that you're displaying? How does it work with the budget that you're displaying? How does it work with the physical place you're displaying it? Your overall text may change depending on whether or not you make a decision about a specific object or photograph that you're using as part of the exhibit. You have to build it all together in this sort of constantly shifting thing. That's what makes it a challenge and a lot of fun. But it's the really rare exhibit that where you can just march neatly along and everything clicks into place, and then you do the next thing, and then it clicks into place, and then you do the next thing. That almost never happens. Sometimes the next thing is going to change your decision about the first thing you did, for a lot of different reasons. So think about that. And I would argue that sometimes constraints make creativity. The photograph I've got here, and a lot of these photographs were provided by staff members. This was provided by one of our staff members. It's a museum in Japan, and that is actually an exhibition map. It's made for people who are visually impaired in some way. So there are there are straight up, and it's in Japan, so there are straight up Japanese labels in which people can feel the actual words describing a thing, but they've also got physical representations of the thing. There's a little bit of silk for the room where the kimonos are, and there's little bits of metal strips there for the rooms where the swords are, for example. That's a really creative way to share information. Is it writing? No, but exhibit presentation is sometimes about sharing information in creative and interesting ways. I think we've all seen exhibits where the words are shaped like the thing that they describe, or they're up high to show you something that you have to look up for. I'm a huge, huge fan of putting things on floors. I'm just a sucker for any time someone does that creatively, because it forces you to look in a new and different place, and that therefore forces you to process information differently than you would every day. And in museums and history exhibitions, we're in the business of sort of sharing new things and getting people's brains to work. And sometimes you can do that with your words by changing the place and the shape of your words, not just by communicating a brilliant idea with brilliant writing. So think about that too. So if you have a small space, think about how you can play with the words in that small space. And
Amanda, I think, again, part of this also leads to the fact that one thing I think that a lot of museums have now realized is that people interact and learn in different ways. And so the traditional hierarchy and words and whatever doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And I think, again, you can't be trying to make your exhibits for every type of learner, but I do think that opens up the creativity aspect for you to say it's okay if you think something would be better done with something that's more tactile or something that's more visually based, sort of picture or word form than actual text. So I think, so be aware of that and I think that creativity is available out there and to feel free to use that as well.
Yeah, strongly agree. So let me give you a very brief example. So right now we're working on a major exhibition about the catamount in Vermont. And instead of writing a paragraph in which I said, catamount fur is soft and it's long to prevent, it's because they live in places with winter and it's this color and it's this feel. I ordered a fake fur from a catamount, and I'm going to briefly say it's adapted to their environment. Feel it. What do you think? Conveys the same information. right? It gets you the scientific reason for why their fur is the way they are, but people can feel that it's soft for themselves, and it's surprisingly longer than you would think, and people can feel that for themselves. So that can be a way of presenting the same kind of information, and also with writing on an exhibit label that just gets at it differently for different ways people think about things. Yeah. Tone. I'm going to go straight up say this is the hardest part of writing an exhibit label. Not the writing, not the research, not the information. That's hard. I'm going to argue that tone is the hardest part of writing an exhibit label. What do I mean by that? I mean the sort of voice in which you speak to your visitors. We're using a specific way of talking to you today, your fellow professionals and fellow historians. I would be delivering this information very differently if I were doing it to a group of preschoolers or to a group of people who had never designed an exhibit before or never even thought about doing an exhibit before. So tone. I want you to think about a couple of things. I don't have the answers for these, but they're going to be specific to your exhibit. Consider your audience. I love this label. Right? Who is this label aimed towards? Is it aimed towards serious scholars in an exhibition about who knows what? No, it's aimed to grab kids' attention and then to teach them something. So what is your audience? Not necessarily, everyone who comes in our doors. But who do you think this exhibit is for? Who are you trying to communicate to? It can also be you're trying to say, well, but yeah, we have lots of different types of people. That's okay. So sometimes you can provide different tones within the same exhibit. Be careful with that. Don't go overboard. Don't write 5 versions of every label and stick them up. That gets a little ridiculous. But sometimes that means you can think about a kid's version of your label that just has a different tone. Sometimes this can mean the vocabulary that you use. I mean, farts, right? Just that gets. I have a 4-year-old nephew. That is his favorite word right now. That just gets right at it. You would use a different word if it were an exhibit aimed at high-level scientific information. But so think about who are you talking to? Who are you having this conversation with when you write this label or showing them? Consider your subject. The same tone and the same voice in an exhibition about science is going to be different from the subject of an exhibition about a deeply serious or controversial or difficult topic. This particular label, it's a little hard to share. This is a label for an exhibition of 19th century portraits, but they decided the subject of the exhibition was not the people in the portraits, but their facial hair. Right, so you can see they gave information about the people, right? I mean, they're not holding information from you, but the point of this label is to describe the style of this man's facial hair and to classify it as if it were a scientific thing and to get you to call attention to that and think about this portrait differently than you might if you were admiring it as a work of art or if you were admiring it as a representation of a person who lived at a specific moment. So that's gonna drive your tone as well. I would argue the biggest tone shift is a serious versus a more lighthearted subject. There's no room for sort of flippant everybody farts jokes in an exhibition about a tragedy. Just either don't do it or be so exceptionally careful about the way you do it. You're the first person to really succeed, and I wouldn't want to be that person. So be really careful, think really hard about that. Think about the seriousness of your topic. Think about the inclusivity of your tone when you're talking about your subject. Are you talking about something that's deeply sensitive and the ways in which people have used language have marginalized things within your subject? I'm sure we can all think of a variety of ways in which sort of language has been used to marginalize a group of people or something like that. So think about the subject of your exposition. Your exhibition. That's going to drive your tone.
And just to that point, Amanda, again, when you are talking about sensitive subjects or marginalized populations, that is also the time to invite them, hopefully, to come and help you to write a label that is, decolonized or is speaking in sort of the tenses and using the words that are appropriate to today. So definitely don't feel like you have to do that alone. I think that's the great chance to run it by the folks where they're really the ones that should have the input on that.
Yeah, strongly agree. And I would argue sometimes consider your subject or consider your exhibition and the way you write a label. Sometimes you're going to break the rules of grammar because, as Eileen says, sometimes the verbs themselves or the ways of descriptions themselves are not the ways that you may be used to. Pronouns are a big one right now. Like grammatically, the use of the plural pronoun they is, I think, still incorrect, but it's also becoming the appropriate way, and especially if that's the way a particular person would prefer to be referred to, use it. I mean, this is not, again, consider your subject and consider your moment and consider your time. Mm-hmm. Consider your intent. Not only do you have your subjects and your audience here, but why are you writing this label? What are you sharing? Okay, this is another pretty straightforward portrait exhibition. This is the Worcester Art Museum. They got a ton of attention for doing this. So they told a little bit about the people, but the information that they placed a primacy on, that is up top, that is the bigger label there, that they want people to pay attention to, was the subject of that portrait's involvement with the slave trade. So they are putting that information first and foremost, rather than the more traditional information below about sort of Stuart's portraiture style and things like that. That is their intent. Their intent was to reframe these portraits of wealthy people of the 17th and 18th century through the lens of their involvement with slavery. So what is your intent with the exhibition? Science museums get this a lot. Is our intent to educate people and call people to action around pollution? That is the intent of our exhibition. This exhibition isn't just about cute sea turtles. It's about plastics in the ocean. And so therefore our intent with every label is going to be to underline that. This may not apply to you as much. You may not have necessarily a social activism thesis for your exhibition, but do think about it. Is your intent to say, my town has always been a fantastic place to live? I mean, that seems really simplistic, but I think you should think about it when you're writing your exhibit. You should have some kind of intent, some kind of thesis, as it were. We talked a little bit earlier in our, when we choose an object, when we had our webinar about choosing an object, you have no matter what your exhibition is, you have an overall thesis. You have something you want to communicate to people, and that should be part of your consideration for exhibit label writing. Anything?
No, I think, again, I want to reiterate, I guess, sort of the way thinking, especially about history, that history is not truth and exhibits are not truth. So, don't, I think the awareness is the important part of that, to know that whether you think you have a point of view or not, you do. And so the more thoughtful you can be about choosing which point of view and using sort of the text and the exhibit to put that forward, I think the better off you're going to be. So.
Yes, strongly agree. The more examined your point of view and the more thoughtful you are about it, generally, the better you.
And I think the better exhibit you have, because then you have a focus and you know what you are providing for information and what points you're trying to make. And I think that really can help also with being able to write more cohesively and write and unbook the wall as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Information quantity and quality. This is an infinite topic, but we're going to touch on a few things. This is one of our exhibitions. And a name and shame here. This is the 1970s, Counterculture in the 1970s exhibition that we had a couple of years ago here at the History Center. This is too much text. We loved this exhibit. People loved this exhibit. We had done 2 years of research, like unbelievable amounts of research, really good research. We had a ton of really great information. We had talked to so many people. This is too much text. I just use the phrase unbook the wall, and I'm going to include that in all of my exhibit discussions going forward, because people are not going to museum exhibitions to read books. They read books to read books. If you have enough information for a book, then please, by all means, write a book. We would be thrilled for that. Exhibitions are about, as we talked about earlier, prioritizing information, organizing information, sharing it in different and thoughtful ways. So, our bad. It's too much. I will grant you that this was by far the most text-heavy portion of the exhibit. This was really the only section where we really did this. And it was because each of these individual things have all had multiple books written about them. So we were struggling ourselves with an absolute like glut. I mean, 2 paragraphs on women's rights in the 1970s is, there was no way it was ever going to be enough. So we just didn't quite nail the balance on that. So, you know, we do it too. It's always a work in progress. So with that in mind, exhibits are not books on the wall. They're just not. We use that phrase a lot here. Is that just a book on the wall, or is there a compelling reason for it to be an exhibit panel? There should be a compelling reason for that information to be part of your exhibit and to be on the panel. It's not just everything about this topic on the wall. So we talked about organizing information. Use more information and more detail the deeper you go into the exhibit. So your topic, your exhibit title is going to be your absolute least amount of detail, right? Our upcoming one is the Catamount in Vermont. That is about as broad as it gets. Counterculture in 1970s Vermont. It's about as broad as it gets. The deeper you go into the exhibit, the assumption here is that a person who is engaged enough to be reading further and further and further. So, okay, they read the intro panel and they were excited by that enough to go to a more specific subject area panel. And they were excited by that enough to look at every single object in the case. By all means, if someone is that into it, they're going to read your 3 paragraphs about that one object. You know, they're going to read the real detail that you put into that. And that's where to let your research really shine. But be careful of not, everyone has to know this thing, so there should be on the biggest panel. You know, you kind of want to reward people for deep looking is a way. It can be an exploratory experience. You glean, some of my very favorite like facts I've gleaned have been from individual object labels. And you can really catch your eye. Nuts and bolts wise, there have been some compelling studies that say 50 words per paragraph or sort of text break section. And then we try to keep to 300, maybe 400 words to sort of an overall label. By label, I mean whatever the gathering of that is, whether that's an object label or whether that's a big panel, or even less. You know, I've seen really effective, really good labels that are only 150 words, and they really nail the sort of subject area topic, and then they let you explore further. They attach more words to the interact of the object or something like that. But there have been some, I find them compelling anyway, studies that 50 words is about what the human eye and human patience is going to digest in a chunk of text. Other than that, they might be skimming. So try and use that. And the trick to this is, you know, writing clearly, writing straight to the point, and really having thought through what you want to say in each sentence. Because you have so few words, you have to be real obsessive about how to use them and how to deploy them. There's a Mark Twain quote that I always use, and I've used it 3 times in the last 6 weeks when talking to people about their exhibits. I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote you a long one. Writing shorter, doing it well, takes much longer. It doesn't feel like it feels like that shouldn't be, but it absolutely is. This will take you longer. Writing those 300 words will take you longer than writing 1,000 words.
And one of the ways that I think that sort of the exercises that you can do is to actually give yourself word limits. So any of you who've worked with sort of online calendar events know that a lot of times they're like, you have to describe this program in 100 words or less, or 50 words or less, or 200 words or less. Like, give yourself that sort of block and don't let yourself go more than that, and see how that adjusts how you edit that block of text down. Can you get all the information is essential in that 50 words, that 100 words, that 200 words? And I think that is a really great exercise in how you have to work through the process of shortening and making your text. The smaller number of words do a lot of work, and it can be done, but as you know, Maida says, it takes effort.
We used to do game is the wrong word, but we used to do a fun exercise in grad school. How many times have you heard someone say that? Okay, in a material culture class where we would bring in just stuff from home. It could be like a hairbrush or something like that, and everyone would bring something in. And we would just get random instructions for writing about them. Okay, this first one, you're going to write a tweet. So 140 characters about this object. Now pass it left. Here's your new object. Now you're going to write 50 words. Now pass it left. Here's your new object. Now you're going to write a headline about this object. Now pass it left. So it was just like forcing your brain to again and again and again process information in different ways. You can do a lot of that. I mean, some of it becomes sort of pedantic just for the heck of it, but it is a way you can train your brain to start to think about that. I find the more I get into an exhibit, the longer I spend writing it, the easier it is to get short, because I've continued to process more and more and more of my ideas and thoughts as I've written through. So my first draft is always longer, and then I'm like, oh, that's so easy to cut. Why did I even, that could be one sentence instead of three. So it gets easier. The last thing I'm going to say about writing, consider your relative size and positioning. If you are putting something 5 foot above a person's head, because that's where you decided to put it on the wall, because that's where you're calling attention or for whatever reason, it's got to be big. I mean, this feels obvious to say, but boy, have I seen some texts that I got eye surgery and I now have 20/15 vision and I would still struggle to read. So just be careful. You can't expect people to read a paragraph that's way above their head, and it has to be it has to be a good enough size that you can step back and still read it easily. And then the reverse, when you get smaller, you can use more words and you can make them smaller when you're talking about an individual object label. Never go smaller than 14 point. I would argue really you should never go smaller than 16. But 14 is the absolute bottom limit. I'm going to recommend you go on any label, even an object label. I know people out there do them down to 12 or 10. I really don't think you should. For a lot of reasons, that much text, even to someone with perfect vision, starts to look like a dense blob. And you always want to think about people who have less than perfect vision, and maybe have some visual impairment, but not enough to sort of need an accommodation, but are still put off by the fact that they have to like hunch and strain and read this tiny text. You don't want people to whip out their reading glasses to read your exhibit labels, in short. Your little ones anyway.
Yeah, and I would say, as part of that, there are guidelines certainly out there related to accessibility for exhibits. And so it's always a good thing to take a look at what some of those are. Again, as far as sort of what some of the point recommendations are for full accessibility, where they should be located on a wall, height-wise, and which sizes. Just so you have an idea, and again, take a moment and like do a sample and stick it up on the wall and really see where that is. And I think that helps to, again, for you to also to remember that this is something that's got to be for a wider number of folks.
Yeah, if you Google ADA signage requirements and things like that, they're actually, so I did a little bit of it while I was prepping this webinar, but anyway, you can Google them, and there are some decently effective sort of blog posts or short guidelines, because they include not just things like size, but also font type, but a distance from the edge of the panel, don't bury your words in a corner kind of thing, have clear space around the words. So those are a lot of things to think about, and they're going to affect how many words you can use, how much space you have to explain something, but useful constraints. All right, the actual writing of it. Let's see here. That's what it looks like. I love to write. I'm actually a very fast writer when I sit down to do it, and it's still really hard. It's still really, really hard, especially this kind of writing with constraints. Write out your thing. Some days that's going to look like you look at it and you're like, that is the worst thing I've ever written, or any human being has ever written in the universe. And some days that's your process. Some days it flows. You all, I'm sure, have written enough to know what your process is, but here's what I'm going to argue for exhibits. Rewrite it way more times than you think you probably need to. Certainly there's a sweet spot where you tip over and everything looks like gibberish again, but you can set it aside for a little while, return to it with fresh eyes. I'm a big fan of passing it off to other people because what you think you're saying might not be what you're actually saying. Or sometimes you get so deep into it, you realize you repeated information or left out a really key piece of information because it got cut somewhere in the editing stage. This is certainly a process you would go through with an article or book, anything like that, but I would argue it becomes more important with an exhibit writing because there's so much less wordage to convey what you need to. And I'm also going to re-emphasize what Eileen said earlier. If you have stakeholders in an exhibit, if you are doing an exhibit about a sensitive population, about a group of people who are still alive or who have family members who are still alive, if you have any kind of partners in an exhibit that have worked with you on your text, if it's like way outside your comfort zone to write about a thing or to have learned about a thing, get their input on it. I strongly recommend. I'm a big fan of shooting off, here's my label on this thing, and this is a thing you're the expert in. Is there anything big I've missed? Am I totally mischaracterizing this thing? In a lot of cases, as Eileen suggested, the phrase decolonizing the museum, museums that write about Native people's objects or about their lives and customs are handing the reins over entirely to them. I'm a huge fan of that. I was at the Fleming Museum, feels like a lifetime ago, 3 weeks ago, and they have done that in their gallery with Native art, and it was a whole different way of seeing the object. That was I loved, actually. It was really, really great. And also, here's something personal, soapbox moment. Museums have power, and the things that we put on exhibit have power. The things that we choose to have on exhibit hold power because we have chosen to put them on exhibit. The fact that we are writing about something gives it attention and gives it power. That is true whether you are the Vermont Historical Society, a local historical society, or anything like that. And I would argue that we should be sharing that with the people who originated the objects that we're putting on exhibit or who have a stake in the objects that we're putting on exhibit. Be clear about your curatorial decisions and your curatorial voice, but as much sharing of that as you can do, the better your exhibition will be and the stronger your institution will be. So there's my soapbox. One last thing, sorry, I wasn't sure if I had it on the slide. One last thing, don't be precious about your text. Be prepared to let it go. I have cut some of my favorite bits of information of all time from exhibit labels because they just don't work anymore. Don't be too precious about it. Don't hold on to something at the expense of the larger idea that you're trying to get across. It goes with that. You are, especially when you're working with outside stakeholders, you may not be the sole final voice of authority in something. And if someone tells you that's just not right, sometimes you got to let it go. And it hurts, but sometimes it's the right thing to do. Okay, etc. Everything else. Not that we haven't tossed enough information at you, and I apologize if I've been speeding up again with the adrenaline and the caffeine. Okay, here are your takeaways. Great exhibit writing is well organized. It is clear and precise. It considers its audience. It focuses on quality over quantity. Fewer, better words. And it's creative within those constraints. So if you can nail all of those things in one, let me know. It's hard to balance, and sometimes you're gonna really nail one and struggle with another. I want to be also more careful about when I say be clear and precise. Sometimes that means opening up. I was describing the difference between that catamount for there. Be precise about the information you're conveying or asking for. Don't just necessarily say, what do you think? What do you think about this? How does this make you feel? Can you imagine this? Don't necessarily, unless you are trying to do a truly free form, which I would argue doesn't always serve an educational purpose, open-ended question. When you're asking a question, be precise about the ways in which you're asking it and the kind of things that you're expecting to get out of it. So be clear and precise about your voice and about your writing within the space itself. Lastly, a couple of resources for you to open up. It's a really nice 10-point guide for the Victoria and Albert, who are certainly experts in museum exhibit label writing. Just a good thing. And it does explain a little bit of their own philosophy on writing labels that I thought was nice. Pinterest exhibit labels. Just check it out. That's a specific person's collection of exhibit labels, but man, a lot of people take pictures of exhibit labels. It's not just us history and museum geeks. It's a thing that everyone does. Was it the Getty that just shared that there was a tweet?
Yeah, so the Getty Museum did a tweet of, basically the tweet was, do you take pictures of exhibit labels too? And then basically got this entire stream going on about, like people sending their pictures of all of the exhibit labels that they take pictures of, because everybody who's a museum does.
Well, and not even, what blew me away? It's not even people who are museum use. Like I have hundreds of pictures of museum labels in my computer files because I found them clever or especially bad or what have you. They have caught my eye in some way, and I feel like they inform my professional practice. The people replying to the Getty tweet, it was just what we would call a tombstone label for a piece of art. It was the title of a painting, the artist of the painting, and the dates. And sometimes that's what they were taking a picture of. They were sharing that in response to the tweet because they wanted to preserve that information. So I guess think about the ways in which your label can sometimes live beyond. So, just Google, just look around, and your own eyes and ears. I constantly, I take pictures of exhibit labels and I take pictures of mounts. How has someone displayed that object? I want to steal the way they did it. Just constantly, and sometimes of overall stuff too, but to refer back to and think about and remind myself of. And actually, when I was preparing this presentation, I sent an all-staff email to the Vermont Historical Society. I said, hey, I know you all have tons of pictures of exhibit labels that you've taken. Can you just send me a couple of your favorites? And all but one or two of the photographs in this presentation were taken by VHS staff members on their own, mostly personal travels to museums. And then the last, Beverly Sorrell is sort of the definitive, the book on exhibit labels and interpretive approach. She's got a website. She's got a new book coming out, already come out?
It's out. It's an ebook related to exhibits. It's one of those things I've downloaded and not yet read. But she's an amazing resource, and exhibit labels is sort of the Bible of the writing aspect of this. So, I think this is a book to have if you are writing exhibit labels.
Yes. Yep. Everyone who's done an exhibit has a copy on their shelf. And she goes a lot into the really specific word stuff. What we didn't talk about today was like exactly how you would workshop a particular sentence for more of an exhibit framing, and she does a lot of that. She's also done some presentations that you can find online. I apologize, I should have linked. The USS Constitution Museum for a very long time had a talk by her that I actually was at in person, probably 10 years ago now, specifically on writing exhibit labels for a family audience. That was really good. She's a really good speaker as well. So strongly recommend her writing. And her website also has tons and tons of exhibit label samples, photographs of things that caught her eye and were particularly good. Or she didn't share any particularly bad ones. I was a little disappointed that I didn't see that, but she's got a lot of really good examples that she shared on her website. So those are all your, so Beverly Sorrell, 2 R's, 2 L's. You can Google her and find out lots more about her. She still presents pretty regularly at conferences. All right.
Yeah,
we're there.
So we do have a couple questions that have come in.
Okay.
So I'll get you to this. So Erica, Donna had a question of, can you speak to universal design aspects, font choices, contrast of font color, background color, and or resources to point us to for that?
Yes. I think AAM's got a good guide up, and I think AASLH had a technical leaflet at one point. But here are just a very quick couple of things. You want to use a sans serif font. So the text that you see up on the screen right now is a sans serif. That means not a Times New Roman, something with clean lines, so that there's not quite as much sort of click cues and things like that on it. We talked a little bit about font size. I would never go to lower than 14 or probably 16 across the board. You want a clear contrast. So can you see, if you can see on the slide you're looking at right now where the Vermont history part of my email address crosses over across our logo a little bit, that would not fly on an exhibit label. You want clear dark color to light color contrast, whichever way it is, dark color on the back or on the text. You want the other one to be a light color, and you want it to be pretty dramatic. Just because you can see it doesn't necessarily mean that it is as visible as possible. There may be, I would Google for ADA signage requirements. There may be specific percentage differences that they strongly recommend, but I don't have them off the top of my head. The last thing I would say is when you're producing the physical labels themselves, you want something that is a matte surface, not a glossy surface. So you shouldn't be seeing reflections of the lights or your own personal reflection on it. I often find that I think science museums fall down on this one because they're always covering everything in plastic.
Gold and plasticky and bright and
They have a lot of grubby hands on things and they want to wipe it down all the time. Even before our current moment, they were sanitizing everything every day. So they tended to have glossier, but so you want to be aware of that. If you are doing like vinyl on the wall, for example, you want to make sure your vinyl is matte and that your color contrast is appropriate. So those are the sort of three things. And then in the last, I would also think about, and again, I know there are specific inch to edge requirements for text on a panel that you have to leave a specific space around.
Yeah, and so I just shared a couple links on here. The first one is the Smithsonian Accessibility Exhibition Design Guidelines. I think that's a really great resource. That's one that I've gone to quite a bit as far as trying to, again, they'll give you sight lines and heights and how you sort of determine that. And then the Getty has one as well, it looks like, for sort of interactive panels and design. So I think they're also, again, a great resource. So another question is, do we have specific software or way to organize? And I'm assuming this is sort of from a writing standpoint, rather than design.
Do we use specific software? Not really. That's a highly personal thing, and it depends a little bit on how you yourself write better. I certainly know people who prefer pen to paper, jotting it out. I find that far too slow for my own brain, as you may have guessed from how fast I talk sometimes. I can type really quickly, so I prefer, even if I'm just typing and deleting, and I have written and deleted a sentence 5, 6, 7 times in a row. Even if I'm doing that, I prefer to do it when I'm typing it, and I just use text editor, Microsoft Word. When we are reviewing text internally, we turn on track changes and make liberal use of the comment feature. We're actually literally doing this right now with one of our exhibits. I sent it off to a number of people and I said, this is not copy edit stage yet, so let's not turn on track changes, but if you have comments, drop them in the side so you can use, and any text editor has this function, right? So in Word, you right click and you insert comment, and then you can make a comment about, hey, this doesn't quite work, or I think the framing on this is tricky, or something like that. We also use cloud documents to share documents with each other, but you can use like a Google Doc if you want to share it with multiple people. You can just do the good old-fashioned emailing it back and forth to each other. I do like track changes. They can be a pain, but they're extremely useful for what they do. For organizing information, when it comes to that, I often do just pen and paper. I just jot down notes and then shuffle the notes and then rewrite the notes. Sometimes I'll shuffle stickies. Right now in the Catamount exhibit, I'm doing drawn out elevations so I know where information needs to go and then writing to that. Sometimes exhibits form like that. So sometimes it may be that you have a very specific space that you have very specific, I can only get so many labels into this space and with the objects I know I have, so that's going to drive how much I'm going to write. Versus I have an infinite black box space, I can write as much as I want, and then I will shape the black box space to match the organization in my head. Every exhibit has been a little different. I don't know that I have specific software to recommend for information organizing. I know there's stuff out there.
Yeah, and I think this is just your process. Again, I think I'm more old school in the way that again, I literally I have cut pieces of paper apart before and rearranged them on tables. And, if that's sort of the way that I work. I do, there are software and I think sort of ways of which you can do that in an online way. But I'm a paper indexy card, move this around. What if I put this here? Kind of way. So I don't know what else is.
Yeah, I'm that way when I'm just sort of playing out with things and jotting down notes. But when it comes time to do an outline or to organize the information, I almost always go digital, and I almost always go straight words.
Yeah.
in a Word document. But there's really no wrong way as long as it works for your brain. Everyone's got different ways of organizing information.
Yeah.
As long as you feel like you've got a handle on it, then I'd say whatever.
So next question, also from Erica, do you have any guidance on low-cost materials for actually printing and mounting labels? Yes.
Yeah, we've used a lot of different things. The first thing I'm going to say is totally depends on your space. Is this a quote-unquote permanent exhibit? Then you're going to need to go a little bit higher cost for more permanent things. Is this something that needs to move frequently? Then you're going to need to think about it differently. Is this something that you have the budget to send out versus do in-house? So that's going to drive what you have. Is it going to be inside or outside is also going to drive what you have. So recommendations for low cost. We are currently sending our stuff out to a sign company in Williston, and it's basically a thin sheet of plastic sandwiched by 2 thin sheets of metal that then has vinyl printed on it. We're liking that. It's on the more durable and more expensive side. You can also, if you're producing them internally, and it's not going to be up forever. This is not a permanent solution, but good old-fashioned foam core is a pretty standard solution. We use something from 3M called it's adhesive 3M adhesive. There's a third word in there.
Right.
I can picture the box. It's made by 3M. It's an adhesive sheet. I think it's adhesive sheeting or something like that. But basically, once you have got the use of that down, we will print out physical object labels in-house, cut them always using new sharp razor blades, because boy, do old ones chew up stuff real fast, and then mount them to foam core using the 3M stuff that I mean.
So it's called Scotch Positionable Mounting Adhesive Roll. So it's basically a double-sided sort of tape that comes in a roll, but the nice thing is it is sort of repositionable for a certain amount of time-ish. And it's, for this one, you can get 50 feet of it for $65 from Blick right now. So it's, as far as sort of double-sided goes, it seems to be a fairly easily workable material. And again, for print, we literally, like the regular plain old object labels, we print them out on paper on our copier here. They're not fancy. Again, for a basic design label, we will usually we have a template that we use in InDesign, but you could do it in Word if that's what you're comfortable with. You could do it in, Publisher if that's what you're comfortable in.
Yeah.
It's a very basic, and definitely for something like a basic label, like an object label or a basic label, come up with a template that you want to use.
Yeah. And
then all you have to do is just plug in the different information and easy to go. And then again, foam core wise, there's lots of options, but you can use, again, as long as it's not going to be up for more than a year, you have the thinner foam core.
Yeah.
Gator board's out there as well, but I think for simple, lower cost, not up for more than a year.
Yeah, and it fits in like a reasonably temperature controlled space. After a year of foam core, and if any of you are closing up your spaces over the winter and then opening up all summer, foam core is not going to last terribly well in those spaces. If it's like mounted to a wall, the humidity gets to it pretty quickly and it can bend. So that's something I would be careful of. You can also, for slightly nicer quality, although honestly for our in-house exhibit labels, I've never had a problem with the copier, but for slightly nicer quality, you can work with a local print shop. If you want to print out something in color, you can do that. We've printed out and mounted slightly larger photographs on foam core. We've done that a number of times. We've worked with all of our copy shops in the Barry Montpelier area at one point or another. You can also go to a Staples. We also, in terms of vinyl to print something, you can also shop out for that. We're getting quoted about $10 to $15 a square foot for printing of color printed vinyl. So if you were to get a whole file printed all together, that would be more towards the $15 per square foot end of things. If you're just looking for text, that's more towards the $10 thing. Or you can find someone who's got one of those Crickets or something like that. We're going to start doing that kind of thing, basic stuff in-house here. And I know a number of museums do it that way. So
Yep, and again, we've got some comments from folks, again, sort of using online companies like Vistaprint or Build to Sign.
Yep.
Those are other great options these days for this. And again, I think it's, it is sort of that cost-benefit analysis. I was talking with someone last week that, again, that the signs that we get printed from SB, they're made to be durable and long-lasting, so we spend the money and the effort on doing that. But if it's something that's going to be up for 3 months, like foam core and a basic printer, it's gonna do you well these days. And I think that's sort of figuring out, what is the best tack for what the purpose of that exhibit is. And the Scotch positional mounting adhesive tip, Erica likes that. And I will say one of the advantages, you can get adhesive foam core. It's a pain. If anybody's ever worked with it, it's a pain to work with. So we will make the recommendation that the positional mounting adhesive roll is easier in that sense. So if you're going to do foam core, I would say, like, if you can do this, the mounting stuff with regular foam core, it seems that's less frustrating, I would say.
Strongly agree. I actively hate the sticky foam core stuff. The adhesive mounting tape, there's no such thing as foolproof. You gotta really read the instructions, gotta really think through and follow the instructions, and you've still gotta be prepared to mess up a couple of them. Yep. I've done literally hundreds at this point, and I always count on messing up 2 or 3 per batch, and it just is starting over.
Yeah, and again, talking about now sort of the command strips and the Velcro dots. I'm a big command strip component. I am keeping them in business. But especially, again, for temporary exhibits, we use them pretty much exclusively in our local history gallery because that changes every 6 months. And I do not have the time nor energy to patch and paint every 6 months. So I think those are really great options these days for being able to mount your exhibit labels on the wall. And I found the command strips are, if you do them correctly, they work really well. And
use more of them than you think you need, because that will also help to prevent some warping. If you just do one in the middle, it will stay up, but it is going to start to warp. If you do one on each corner, you're sort of fighting some of that humidity force that makes the foam board want to warp, and you're holding it a little more stable on the wall. I like the command strips. If you're thinking something is going to be permanent, though, put some screws in the wall, or some brads in the wall. I've spent a couple of hours, many hours recently, just standing in one of our exhibit rooms. That's what I'm going to do a little bit this afternoon. Sometimes it just can't be helped. So think about how long you need something to be up.
And I would say we are technically over the 11 o'clock time. We're happy if anybody still has questions to keep chatting. But I did want to say thank you to all of you who do have to leave right now. And again, this recording will be available on our website afterwards in a little while. So if you want to listen to it again, if you happen to miss any sound or anything, or you want to share it with anyone else, it'll be up there. So I think a couple of questions more. Sandra had a question about, do you have all the labels in one file? So I'm guessing that's sort of that for an exhibit question.
I do, because we often generate so many files related to one of our exhibits that it starts to make me a little nuts if they're all individual. That said, that's because we all communicate very closely internally. If you're sending it out to a designer, I'm going to make a pitch that if you're sending them something like, this is the text and these are the images, you break that up by panel. And each folder is a panel, and then the images are in the folder, and the text is in the folder, and so it's really clear, and you don't have to write out what you mean. So I'm gonna make that pitch if you're working with an outside designer in any way. I generally write the whole thing in one document, and then if I have to split it up, I split it up. I don't know that there's a best practice. If you prefer to have every single label as an individual file, sure. Go for it. Personally, that starts to feel cluttered to me. So what our Icons and Oddities exhibit is just one long Word document.
And again, I think this is going to depend, again, on sort of how big both the exhibit panels that you're creating or text or labels are. Again, something like Icons and Oddities, that's literally just object labels.
It's just 20 objects.
So versus something like the Catamount, which is going to be a mix of object labels and panel text and word clouds and timelines and
Catamount is going to be at least three documents, one for object labels, one for panels, and then one for interactives. So it is being split up in that way.
Yep. All right. Any other questions from folks before we sort of get done for the day? Looks like some very nice thank yous and all that jazz. So thank you guys. We are really happy that folks have joined us, and it looks like we were able to make this happen in the age of what everything is
in our
going
current
on right
moment.
now. So again, this is always ongoing conversations. Any follow-up questions that have to happen after that you think of that you really wish you asked, or you get someplace and you get stuck, again, feel free to contact us. Our emails are there, and we're happy to sort of hopefully try and point you in a good direction, and or at least share what we know or what we've learned. Sometimes that's what we can share is what has not worked for us. So,
which doesn't mean it might not work for you.
Your mileage might vary. But again, thanks again, everybody. And looks like I don't see anybody typing. So
I'm going to add one last, just before we exit, just one last. We broadcasted at the beginning of the hour, but the Vermont Historical Society is closed to the public right now, along with many other institutions and museums like that. However, we are all still working. So reach us by email, please. That's the best way to reach us. And that will be for the foreseeable future.
Yep. And please turn into our Facebook page tomorrow at noon for our third Thursday talk on women's suffrage in Vermont. Thanks, everybody.